BB, everybody. It's been a while. I've been traveling and doing some stuff, had personal stuff. So it's been a while since I did an episode, but I also wanted to give us all time to epically watch the final season of Lucifer. So before we get into that, I want to welcome back Gail to the podcast. I want to welcome Carrie to the podcast and welcome back Mira, because Mira has done her own episode where we talked about her business as well. So and to all the Lucy fans that'll tune into this either in video or when I get the audio up today, uh, welcome and hope you enjoy. So we have a lot to talk about. Uh, I have the episode synopsis in front of me of the season, even though I've watched it twice or three. I don't even know. So I think the best thing for everybody to kind of go down the line would be we're gonna go episode by episode, all 10 episodes of the final season of Lucifer, and then we'll talk about the series as a whole and kind of what's coming up now that the cast is on to other projects and crew, and then there'll be conventions next year. So let's start with the first episode. Nothing ever changes around here. So I wanted to start with the fact that they did a great job with callbacks to the previous season, and the fact that the opening scene is the opening kind of callback to the opening scene of the show is just brilliant. So let's talk about how they brought back actors, specifically the motorcycle cop in this episode. So who wants to kick it off?
Well, it was definitely fun. I mean, for a lot of us, that opening scene is kind of what drew us into the show because it was just there's attitude to it and it was kind of fun. So to have them kind of repeat it and call back to that I liked it. I sat there and kind of snickered the whole time, and the actor was all excited about it on Twitter too. He's like, "Oh my gosh, they invited me back," and I just thought that was really cool.
And I also like the scene. Go ahead.
I think that they perfectly set the mood for, I think, what they had in mind. Like, it's a loop, because with Lucifer, it's always a hell loop. And so they looped it back to season 1, and it can just go over and over and over and just keep binging it.
Yeah. I feel like they want to, have, a really good callback to season 1. So, put in, the cop character, and they want to, have us go back to the memories of the first episode.
What was your thoughts? Because for those that don't know, and I spent 2020, the year we don't really want to talk about, in LA. I lived there, and the Magic Castle. I drove by it a million times, and when they put it. This episode is centered around that because I've heard about how cool it is, but it was shut down for COVID, and then obviously they got to shoot in it. But what was cool is the storyline of and the fact that Lucifer's all giddy about magic and showing Chloe around, and it's a date, but then it turns into a murder mystery, and it's just talk about how. And then they introduced Carol really well as the new detective. So talk about what your thoughts were of the Magic Castle as a set piece for this episode.
Well, isn't it really hard to get in there? So they liked for them to use it as a location was really cool because most of us will never get to see it. So with this iconic thing, they got to go and do a shot in there. I personally totally loved how nerdy Lucifer was about magic. Yeah. I just thought that fits him so well. You said, he's giddy. He was so nerdy about it. I just thought that was adorable. So I thought that was really it was fun. It was like a light way to get a kind of a serious season started, maybe.
It was definitely super fun because I've never seen that castle. I didn't know it existed. Well, I'm sheltered in Florida, so how would I know?
It's the Magic Castle.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The Magic Castle was the best thing they could have shot in because they basically want to have sets of fun and adventures, and also reminds me of a murder mystery dinner. So basically they're having dinner solving a murder, but they're not actually detectives anymore.
Yeah. And I thought the special effects in the episode, we talk about the other special effects, we'll get to that later. But the funny part is when Lucifer is walking Chloe in and then he's getting drinks and it's like Bones is like a skeleton just going by and there's a floating guy and it's like they just walk by like it's normal. Like,
Nothing happened.
yeah. Yeah, but I did hear that you have to be a member of the Magic
Yeah.
Castle.
Yeah, you cannot just go in there. So that fact that they had a whole, location shoot, and I'm sure some of it was sets, but the fact that they got to like use it as a location was really cool. Like that was so. It's something you're not going to see a lot on a TV or a show or a movie. It's just not going to happen. So it was so cool.
Yeah, and I also thought it was funny. Well, they also, other than Lucifer being like, I don't want to, like, it's magic, don't ruin it, but also the fact that like Chloe's like still being a detective even though she's off the clock.
Oh yeah.
But because they were there as witnesses, was great. And I think also bringing like Ella being like, "Oh, you guys are back, but not really," and just it was just really funny because
I feel like they get like sort of a warning that they're having a hard time stopping who they are to be a new
Person.
them. Yeah. You can sort of see some warning signs in that they're not totally sure how this is going to work quite yet. And they don't know how to like give up the current job sort of.
Right. And I think it was because, as we will talk about, the season gets a lot crazier. I think it was a great intro episode for the final season because it's more about the callbacks, but also like the new era of leading from season 5. So that leads us, I guess we can move on to the next episode, Buckets of Baggage, which is great because it's the drag queen episode. I love Bob the drag queen, and the fact that they got him in this episode was great. But let's talk about the fact that like Lucifer's like, well, I need to help somebody, but he's like, so Carol, because I don't like Carol. It's just great that they looked into this and then, and they kept the parallels of like what the episode talks about and what Lucifer is. He's still growing in this season, which is funny. In terms of like, not necessarily with Dr. Linda, but basically like, oh, I'm learning a lesson of maybe I should become God. So talk a little bit about Buckets of Baggage and how this episode shaped going into the season.
It seems like Lucifer was still trying really, really hard to find his purpose and how he will fit into this whole world or the new world, and he just keeps searching for himself and constantly. It's just a funny way to see him be like almost like in season 1 and like the earlier seasons when he comes up with these crazy ideas and the funny puns and all that. I missed that.
Yeah,
it was good to see.
Yeah,
and Carol character is brilliant, and I was delighted to see that they found some storyline for Ella to find a real good guy.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and we're not. What's funny is that Ella is just like, is this a guy? Because has PTSD, as we remember, and so she doesn't want to go full in, but she's like, is Carol a good guy? Like, that's what's. And Chloe's trying to convince her in the season, like, yeah. So, what are your thoughts on like? I thought it was cute that they bonded over. What was the movie? The old 80s movie. What was it?
Oh,
Jackie
shoot.
Chan.
Yeah, it was like
Jackie Chan movie.
It was
a
Jackie Chan movie. Yeah, totally.
And I just so great.
Well, it was cute that she found somebody that has that sort of like nerdiness energy that she has, but is like so forgiving of things that are hard for her. Like it was okay with him that she needed to take her time and she wasn't quite sure what she wanted, and like that didn't scare him away, because that isn't the way it goes for some people. Sometimes they don't want to wait things out, so it seemed like that was boding well on him as a person, and the actor's like super likable, so
Yeah. True.
Played it well.
Like I think like they have like a good relationship and all that stuff, and like they just need a person to find it. I was so upset when Pete was a serial killer. I thought he was a good guy, but
mm-hmm.
Well, they needed a twist in that season. I feel like I saw it coming, but then we talked about it on the last episode. I didn't with Pete until I rewatched the season and saw that, there was a lot of foreshadowing that I missed.
Yeah. I didn't feel like something was right with him, so I wasn't like super shocked.
Well, I knew it wasn't going to be, it was too good to be true, kind of, but I didn't know how they were going to reveal it. But I think that was why in this season they were trying to play the whole, like, are you going to be skeptical about Carol? Because he's the new
definitely.
guy. But still, he was a friend of Dan's, so we all wanted to have that hope that, well, Dan's not trying to, hurt Ella. So I think that's why yeah. And I'm glad. We'll get to that, but bringing back Kevin Alejandro as Dan, but he's a ghost, is kind of the best thing ever. So I guess I'm just trying to go through these episodes. I know it seems like we're rushing through, but we have a lot to talk about. So the next one was epic, Yabba Dabba Doomy, and the animated part of it, which, side note, in my opinion, if anything Lucifer related comes back, I think they'll do an animated series, because why not? But let's talk about how this episode was actually, there was a lot of references to the 80s, because it's a flashback episode of a character, and also this is the first time that Chloe goes to hell with Lucifer, so that was an interesting kind of like turn, but awesome at the same time. So before we get into the animated part of it and the loop and kind of what the episode ends, talk about the fact that like we're now seeing Chloe and Lucifer be more on the same, they're more on the same page as a couple, and the fact that he was like afraid to take her to hell, but she's like all about it because she's addicted to Amenadiel's necklace. So let's talk about the power that she's feeling and the addiction that has happened.
Who wouldn't be?
I know.
That's true.
Valid. It's valid.
I was like shocked, like I was like wondering how can she go to hell, because she might die, in hell if she gets sucked into one of those portals.
True, but I also, because of the strength she gets from that necklace, I also felt that she was going to be fine going with Lucifer for some reason. Plus, if Lucifer does say yes, he's going to take care of her. I mean, he would not. He would know. So yeah, I think that was a good dynamic, but it's funny that Lucifer didn't kind of, in this episode, he didn't really realize what was happening yet about, I mean, we get to that later, but about the necklace and what it meant to Chloe. So it's interesting how, we can see it as an audience, and then we're right there hoping that Lucifer's figuring out what's going on. But what I liked about this episode and the flashbacks to the 80s and kind of bringing it back to isn't that the pilot episode that was the pilot episode? Another flashback, basically, the who they're going after. I can't even think of his name at the moment.
Jimmy Barnes.
There we go, Jimmy Barnes. Yeah, and that, and finding the origin story of like, if this would have gone differently, he wouldn't have even met Chloe. So that was a great callback too, to kind of close in that loop of the first basically going to help his friend that got killed. So let's talk about how they integrated the animated part of it to kind of that was hilarious, but it also then it turned into a flashback of like, well, we need to help and see why he's as evil as he is. So talk about your thoughts when you saw. Well, we kind of thought we knew there was an animated episode coming. It wasn't like a spoiler. We didn't know how they were going to do it. So what was your thoughts on how they executed it?
I think that they did a way better job. That I was afraid first when I saw that there will be an animated section, and I'm like, oh no, so many people try that. But then it was really funny, and it was so well executed, and it's just I was laughing so much at it. And this episode actually, what I thought of it had such highs and lows, like so wide gap between the lighthearted and heavy in the end, that this episode just hit me so hard in the end with how Jimmy Barnes actually become what was the reason, like childhood, uh, uh, what is it called?
Like trauma.
Trauma, that's the word I was looking for. Like childhood trauma can affect you throughout your whole life.
Right.
If it's deep. And it's just the way this show goes to depth, sometimes it just hits you in the guts. And this episode was one of those to me.
Well, and I think that's another like bigger callback to like so many characters who have trauma themselves that they're trying to get through, another kind of loop thing. That like sometimes, you know, you get so focused on yourself, you don't always think about what can make someone else do the things that they do, and it goes for him all the way back to his mom. So, you know, parental pain is a lot of the characters deal with that as well. So I thought that was kind of a neat. I think they tied a lot of things up in neat little bows, and I feel like to me, like every episode has a little bit of that loop thing going on in it. And I thought that was kind of cool.
I agree because I think
very good.
before we get to other things later, but I think by doing specific detailed like come around, like we come back to this character and this is why this happened, really did make this feel like the final season.
Mm-hmm.
Because which is bittersweet because, you know, there's the questions we had about certain storylines, and Jimmy Barnes, it was the first episode, the pilot episode, but it was also one of the most important like cases basically because it established the show. So Carrie, what were you gonna chime in on this?
Oh, I was gonna say for like the cartoon episode, I was really I was basically hoping for like a good cartoon, and when they said gonna have like people from Harley Quinn do it, and I'm like, I love that show so much, so I hope they do it justice. And when I watched it, amazing in every way. And Lucifer had some of those Harley Quinn aspects to it, and definitely I loved it.
Yeah. So side note, for those that haven't watched it, Joe and Ildy, the showrunners, did kind of like a podcast like this right after the season aired. It's on YouTube. It's Word Balloon. Check it out. But they talked about the fact that Joe had wanted an episode since the show started, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe he wrote this one and got it going. And he said it was also because of COVID, because it was easier for Lauren and Tom to go and do voiceover, and it was to keep people socially distanced. That's kind of one of the big reasons why they did this episode. So I thought that was clever too, because I mean, they didn't want to not do an episode, and they're like, well, why don't we do an animated episode? Well, part of it, at least, to help with how they had to shoot during COVID. So yeah, I thought it was really great. But another thing we've talked about, a big reason why I watched the show as a whole is the music. And Justin Camps as the music supervisor and the team with Tom and Ildy and everybody did a really good job, specifically in this episode, getting harking back to the 80s with Duran Duran and all of that. So I thought it was great. And the DeLorean and like
I don't know, it
Back
made
to the
me feel
Future.
old. It's like I'm sitting in Back to the Future again as a little kid. So it was
Yeah,
fun.
it was great though. But it was funny because when didn't
I
Tom
wanted him
release
to
a
like to
photo of
drive the
it standing
DeLorean
in
Yeah.
front?
like,
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did, and I think Josh did too.
But I didn't know how they were going to integrate. I was like, why is there a DeLorean? What are they doing? Like,
I thought it was clever. I think the show doesn't get enough credit for the clever stuff like that. They find ways to put the most random, fun things and just kind of stick it in there and somehow make it work in the plot. And it's fun. That's why you have to watch it multiple times so you can catch all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is definitely the show that the more you watch it, the more you find in
Yeah.
it, in depth,
like
as
fans like hidden clues throughout the show.
Yeah.
so let's
speaking
move
of
on to.
Sorry, speaking of the voiceover, when I found out, because at first when I watched it, I didn't realize that Tom did the devil level in
Mhm.
the animated
Yeah,
section
that's
as
part.
well. And I
It's like
just rewatched it, and I'm like, yeah, that's him, and playing with his voice, and that was so funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that is funny. But also, it's so Tom. He wants to, I mean, from playing two characters at once to voiceover of two characters, I think this was a breeze in the park for Tom. After playing Michael as well. So I want to keep going on. I know we're kind of rushing through these, but Pin the Tail on the Daddy, episode 4. Great title name, but this is where we finally, the introduction at the end of the last episode of who's this person on Lucifer's throne, and we're like, I didn't know how they were gonna. They introduced her, but you didn't know who, and then it's because she then becomes, after talking to Dan in his purgatory, being like, oh, this is how I'm gonna play it. So before, I don't want to go down the negative route, but I know there's been some debate in the last month or so from the fandom about how she was introduced and like how it didn't make sense as Rory, that she kind of was going to portray the whole thing and go after Michael, but then the idea of Dan came up. I mean, that's how they brought Dan back, but at the same time, it was kind of. What are your thoughts of it as a plot, kind of weird way of introducing Rory before we even know that she's Lucifer's daughter?
I thought it was cool of how they introduced her because I feel like in the beginning like I didn't know like who she was, but as like she got to Michael, I'm like, she's probably Lucifer's daughter. And she wants revenge like so much, and I'm like, no, don't do this. Do not do this. You're gonna regret it.
Definitely, I was suspicious of her throughout, almost until the very last episode, because I'm like, they always twist things around, and maybe she is not what she says who she is, and so it could be just me, and I was just side-eyeing her throughout the whole episode. I'm like, are you really who you are? And as well as she played others talking about their future, and when she went to talk to Maze and Eve and just joking with them about different situations, and then I'm like, you're messing with everybody. Why would you be who you say you are? you know?
I will say though that she does have the coolest wings ever, even though they are a weapon.
My favorite.
Yes, I think out of the whole angel people I've seen, I think she has the coolest. Definitely, because they are real weapons, not the others who are like basically feathers, and all you can do is slap them around.
I also love the part when, was it later in this season, Chloe's explaining this to Amenadiel, like about what her wings are, and we all think that Amenadiel's going to be like, oh no, And he's like, man, he's all jealous about the wings. He's like, oh, those sound so cool.
Well, he's a fighter by nature, so.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was hard for me with the whole Rory thing because, like, I knew some stuff ahead of time, so I kind of wasn't shocked by her, but I didn't know what they were going to do with her part of the time, so I was kind of, like, waiting to see where it was going to go, as I knew some stuff. It was kind of neat because they really did have you kind of, like you were saying, like, side-eyeing her the whole time, like, wait a second, what's this chick's deal? So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, but I know that I've seen a whole lot of controversies.
Yeah.
Not everybody was quite feeling it, which is understandable. Like, I can see both sides of it, so totally get it.
I think the thing too with Rory is, well, I love the actress because I knew who she was because I love Deadpool.
Yeah, me too. Like, I love her Deadpool.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she brought some of the Negasonic teenage warhead into this character, and I'm like, yay, finally
Like,
a character.
the attitude. Yeah, she had that attitude.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Maya?
I don't know.
Okay, no worries.
Oh, that you cannot make everyone happy with whatever.
Yep.
Agreed.
Right, gonna come up with. I mean, there will be always naysayers, so it is what it is.
Well, you know, and everybody's going to have a different perspective and different wishes for how they see certain things to play out. And if they don't see that on the screen, sometimes it's disappointing to them. So, like, I see both sides of it. I can see why people loved and didn't like some things, and makes sense to me. So,
and also the writers took notice of fans' comments before, and they incorporated it into the series. And so that's why probably a lot of people were more disappointed that their point of view did not make it to the series. Maybe. So I don't know.
Yeah,
they try to make everyone happy with their decisions, and but they really look to the fans for inspiration. And we got mostly everything that we wanted in season 6.
I kind of felt like, and I told some people this, like, maybe everything wasn't exactly what I had envisioned, but it wasn't my story to tell. So I kind of found peace in it that way. Whether I loved or didn't love everything throughout the episodes in the season, it was their story to tell, and they got to tell it the way they wanted to. And that's, we're lucky enough that we did get to kind of hint and give them input about some things, but ultimately they get to tell the story, and we just kind of have to go with it. That's just how life is.
I mean, they are brilliant writers. I love their stuff. And I love their references and their jokes, and it's one of my favorite shows that I can rewatch and still laugh. Put me in a good mood.
Well, and also, I mean, at the end of the day, this is an art form, and so, I think the issue too with this though is because as fans we've brought the show back a couple times, and they did incorporate, as you mentioned, stuff that has been suggested by fans. I know people were disappointed, but that in my opinion, that can't be an expectation because it's the crew, the cast, the writers.
Yep.
At the end of the day,
it's up to them.
That's what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's their story. We're lucky enough that we got to participate in it to a point, but it's still their story to tell, and we don't always get what we want. Like I said, that's just how life is. Sometimes you don't get what you want. So I don't know. I that's just kind of my take on it. And I think everybody's viewpoints are valid.
Yeah.
Another thing that was funny in this episode is Lucifer going to all the former girlfriends he had, I guess you could say. And the references, I love the reference when he goes to Miami, the references about oh yeah, I had this one binger in Miami back in the day, and it was just.
But then did you catch it that he looks like CSI Miami when he puts his on?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
okay,
and
the here.
Well, it's and also there's kind of, remember earlier, I don't remember what season was it, season 4, when Minadil's in Lux, and he's going around asking him because he's just found out he's going to be a father, and he's going around asking, so do you have a good relationship with your father? And like the one guy's like, yeah. I just thought it was another kind of reference to when Amenadiel did it, like in season 4, of like now Lucifer
I
doesn't
think
want
they
to be a
brought back
dad.
the actor.
Yeah.
Like for season 6, I think like they brought back the exact same actor who said that to Amenadiel just to like play on words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, really funny.
Yeah. But yeah, this episode starts with really get deep with when Lucifer kind of realizes after looking Rory in the eyes that it's undeniable that she's his daughter, especially even though he's trying to push that away and prove that she's not.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was a good scene when he shows up in San Francisco, like at the end after the farm fight that was amazing. That that basically, you know, he meets the other daughter of that one lady that was a priest, right? And it's like, call your mother, but that whole scene of like, no, you know, family's important.
It's like that scene is like,
yeah.
it's funny.
So anyway,
I enjoyed the fight scenes, how they were done, like, and they involved Chloe so much in many episodes that it was brilliant. Finally, see her fight.
Yep.
Regardless of her special power, but it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I agree.
Nice to see her as a badass, right?
Yeah. She's always so nice. Come on, kick some butts.
Exactly.
Yes, I guess because apparently Lauren is completely opposite of her character in real life. So in terms of like just being hilarious, and apparently is the funny, like makes everybody laugh. So I think it's great that we kind of saw her fight. But I think that was also for years been a suggestion by people on Twitter, right? I've seen that a lot of like, we want to see Chloe fight in an episode. I've seen some fans suggest it in the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, well, because she, you feel like sometimes she gets relegated here and there just because of the nature of the character, and it's nice to see her get to, be the tough policewoman who can kick some butt. We like female empowerment on this show, so definitely.
Agreed. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, now we're getting into the nitty gritty because the next 5 episodes, a lot happens. So the next one is the murder of Lucifer Morningstar, which is an epic title. But this one's really emotional by the end because, again, as we allude to a fight. But the fact that like they're still bringing in the fact that they were partners and would like to solve murders. I thought this was great that they brought it back with this episode. Specifically now that they're like, okay, Rory, and also introducing to Chloe that she's also her child. So talk about that little dynamic and like Chloe wrapping her head around the whole thing about Rory.
I think she was like shocked that she had a daughter, and she knew like that if she had another kid, that her name would be Aurora, and it would be like Rory for short. But when I watched it, I was like, wow, she doesn't know. Like, when her Rory comes in the future, I think they messed up their head. Like, I'm gonna have a kid with Lucifer in a couple of months. Like, it's so strange.
Agreed.
I almost feel like she was too good with it. Like, it was, I don't know. I felt like she accepted it a little too easily.
Yes, but I also think now with what has happened, she's a little bit more like, what else could go on? I'm dating the devil. So, like, I think it was also like just acceptance of the unknown at this point, even though it took her a while in season 4, but I think she's kind of come around. I don't know.
yeah, just look at her situation. Seriously, what she went through and experienced, and changed all her beliefs about what, hey, what she believed before. That's why she was still suspicious as well, and cautious, I would say. Like, her demeanor towards Rory is cautious at
Right.
first, but then she's putting on her investigative qualities
Side.
and trying to ask the right questions to find out if she's telling the truth or not. But then she knows those facts that no one else knows,
Right.
and she just goes with it, I think.
But I mean, now that you mention it, Gail, I would say it was kind of like, okay, we move on to the next thing kind of really quickly. We kind of just said, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I was kind of like, okay, like I get that. Yeah, she's kind of getting used to everything, but man, that was real quick.
That
But
was really tough.
But I also think what was
She
interesting.
didn't fully believe it, but she went with it until she actually was pregnant.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess. I mean, there's more arching themes in this episode that they wanted to address, other than just everybody being introduced to Rory. I think it
yeah,
was
if
it
that
was
and that maybe went rushed.
because we can't forget. We haven't even talked about it, but we can't even forget that like Maze and Eve are getting married, which is a big deal. So it's like there's a wedding going on, and their storyline to fully as a couple, which is great. I love Maze Eve.
me too.
So I think that was too of like family and how important that was, and basically the introduction of Rory trying to screw with them all of like when she meets Maze and Eve and Amenadiel and Lux. That's that scene cracks me up because they were all like, "We're gonna break up," and then you don't know who I am. Like it was so played so perfectly.
But it's so great because it's like she's so Lucifer's daughter by doing something like that.
Yeah.
Screwing with people a little bit.
So in this episode, another thing too is we do see because like in the trailer they kind of alluded to this episode, but the fight between Chloe and Lucifer. For when I first saw the trailer for this season and saw that, I was like, oh, maybe it's somebody who
and have it in
or something.
Like her body.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
But then when this played out, it's the necklace and the Azrael's blade being on Earth. Yeah.
That was a good twist.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good twist.
And also
because the trailer and
I don't think we
actually is.
Yeah, well, I don't think we would have ever thought that we would like to see Lucifer and Chloe fight like that. So it was a way again to make Chloe, fight again, but not together. Because the previous episode they were fighting as teammates. So it's interesting that they do that parallel of like fighting in his penthouse. But the ending part of like she realizing, almost getting so close to killing Lucifer, and then realizing, oh no, what is happening to me?
It's an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's just you see the change. I feel like that's where their dynamic is starting to be a lot more. They're more in sync about things, I think, and I feel like decisions and knowing why those decisions have to be made, and they need to kind of make those decisions together. And I just felt like they're acting more like a couple than a sort of couple. I don't know, maybe that starting to be more like hive mind kind of thing.
Agreed.
That was a good fight too. I like that. And how they made it that Lucifer was holding back so much. I mean, he could have polished her, even though with her powers, which we saw in the end when he just pushes that wakes her up. It was just so nicely done. I love watching these things. These little
Detail.
Like,
Yeah.
I would call this very an emotional fight between them, because she's under the influence of the blade, but also he's emotional too because she cannot see past the blade when he's trying to call a name twice.
Agreed. But it's a whole thing too of like, again, we see the growth that Lucifer has done in therapy, because the way he handles it at the end of like, it's the blade, I know it's not you. Because if you think about it, if it was Lucifer of like season 1 or season 2 in terms of emotional growth, they would have freaked out. But now he's just like, this is who I love, so I need to like explain what's going on to her and be a little bit more sympathetic. I think that was a great way of saying, look at the growth that he has had and from therapy, basically.
Yeah, because
he's been training to become a therapist.
Yeah.
Right?
So I thought that was great. A way of ending that episode.
And he's got, you can see that he's starting to develop more empathy, which he's had off and on, but he is really good about ignoring it sometimes. And you can see that he's starting to employ it a lot more in his interactions with the people in his inner circle. Like he's sometimes, to me, like more almost, or in the past anyway, like almost more empathetic with strangers than with people around him, his close people. And in these last season or two, he's starting to think a lot more about his behavior to the people around him that he loves. Like he gets better with Maze than he has been. He starts to understand Dan, and he cares more about his brother Amenadiel, and like he has more empathy towards the people around him, and that's good for a therapist. So
yeah, I thought it was great of like tying that in too. Because I think a big important aspect of the show, other than the fact that it's about this character redeeming himself, I think it's really great how they've really, I wouldn't say destigmatized, but made the idea of therapy
mainstream.
Yeah.
The main topic.
Because I've gone to therapy. I have had mental health issues. I think we need to talk about mental health more and more and more to help the world. And I think it's great that this show is like, no, go to therapy.
It's okay to go to therapy.
Or find somebody, or find, not necessarily, I know, like, specifically, like, going to therapy can be expensive, but or reach out to somebody, or reach out to a family member, a friend, or something like that.
And I think, and I've had this same discussion with a couple of people since the show ended, and we were kind of talking about just that idea that it's more normalized, and they're also showing you that it's not a quick fix. It takes time.
Yes.
You don't go to one therapy session and suddenly you're fixed or cured. Sometimes it takes a really long time, and he's a really good example. Like, he has so much crap he's got to get through. He's lived forever, but like, it's showing you that it's a process. And I think once he understands that and he understands himself, that's what leads to his ultimate end, which I'm sure we'll get to soon enough here in discussion. But like, it's normalized that you have to do the work.
Yes.
And I thought that was really cool about it.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the next episode, which you might not be surprised, but actually a lot dirtier than that is what it's called. But I love this episode because, again, I think it needed to be discussed about police and having bad apples in police forces and what has gone on specifically after 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and everything. I mean, real shit. I'm putting it out there. And how they incorporated it into one of the most popular shows ever. But it did it in a very tasteful way of like, we're teaching you why this is important. Why there needs to be police officers that actually might not pursue another position to kind of make sure that the community and do more community service. I thought that was great. And also showing Amenadiel as a cop was fantastic. So let's talk about this whole storyline and how they kind of wrap it up from Caleb in season 4 to now.
I'm so glad that entire storyline with Caleb got more depth to it, because I think when that occurred, I think for a lot of fans it felt like the ending just was really hard to take, and for them to find a way to wrap such an important topic around, to kind of clear up and work through what happened there, was really smart. It's painful to watch, but it's also important because the topic needs to be discussed more. So I thought the
Yes.
show did it, like you said, in a tasteful way to just get people thinking, and I think that's a good way to kind of delve into a really sensitive topic for a lot of people. So I liked it. It was very funny, but it was also really serious. So I mean, they balanced the two out really well. But I'm really glad that they chose to address it.
I like the episode. It gives like what I think it gives the audience like a funny moment, and then it goes like into a learning lesson for everybody. Like to say, we need to discuss this more often. It can't be put underneath the bed, or it can't be like hide away from anybody. We need to like open up more and just like throughout the whole city.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder why everybody is protecting still those bad apples, because that's how it seems like. And then when Chloe gets into it in more depth and really steps in, goes back in the next episode, then it just continues with this trying to fix things. Like, there's a way. If there's a will, there's a way to fix things.
Yeah, I think they proposed solutions instead of just putting the topic out there. There was one way to do something. If you see something about it and you feel you need to do something, get in there and get your hands dirty and do something about it. And I think that was a really nice way to like give a lot of purpose to Amenadiel's character and Chloe's character, and as well as the other cops and things. And it was a really smart way to talk about something that's very hard to talk about. The things aren't going to change if you don't talk about it.
Exactly.
So it needs to happen.
No.
And I think I would love at a convention to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
But there was talk leading in to when there was articles after 2020's issues in the Black Lives Matter movement, that we went the protesting, which I participated in. But there was talk about the fact that like what is going to happen with pop culture and the fact that there's been a lot of cop shows and they haven't addressed this.
Yeah,
and
what are they going to do about it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think knowing how well, rehearsed and researched that the entire cast and crew of the show is, and how it's been a diverse show from day one, they knew they had to address this again, because not only the cast, but just because it's important for a show that it started out as a procedural and it developed since it went to Netflix into more of the other storylines and building on the characters. But I think they needed to address it this way because a lot of shows like a Law and Order, not to put down all these other shows, but as they glamorize being a cop as like everything's great, and but they haven't been addressing really what's going on.
The real issue between the police force.
So I thought it was great. That's why I love this episode so much, because I think it's important for a show as popular as Lucifer has become to really kind of put something into what is actually realistically happening with police and the communities.
I feel like it's so good because we have a cast and a crew of writers and a crew that they often put their voices out there for things that were important to them, and they translated that into little bits and pieces here in episodes, and then occasionally an entire episode. Like, I feel like they put their money where their mouth is, and that's sort of a brave thing to do. Like, it's hard to talk about hard things, but they chose to do it, and I think that was really neat. We need more of that. Yeah,
I agree.
Well, it was another testament of their capability of going from the very lighthearted end to the depths of nature of humans.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
In one episode. Yeah.
And another thing, for those that don't know, before one of my all-time favorite shows before this show was Bones. So the references and brought back the actress who played Loretta, who was like the main district attorney in Bones.
I
just
love that
loved-
so much.
Me too. I watched it a lot.
Yeah, just the Bones references, like, and the fact that that's a bonding thing for Lucifer and Rory. I'm like,
And the fun they had with it on Twitter, you know, afterwards, after all the shows were out, that was amazing. Like, oh, this is so cool.
yeah. All right,
I
so
feel like-
wow.
I wonder if
Go
like
ahead.
Bones and Lucifer should do like a crossover episode, just like for us. Have
would be-
Lucifer go on a phone and it'd be like drunk.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know what to do with him.
yeah. So I did want to move on to the next episode, which is the wedding, Beth Fiend's wedding, that we've kind of already talked about that was happening between Maze and Eve. But this episode was so beautiful. Like, it was beautifully shot. Not that they all weren't, but just the fact that they had the wedding at the Royal Albert concert. No, I don't even know what it's called, but at the concert hall in
Yeah.
Yeah, the Disney concert hall.
the Disney one. Sorry, I'm thinking of the one in London. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah. So let's. But it also didn't start out smoothly because they also introduced a character that we never would have thought would show up, which is Adam. So let's talk about that. Like when that and the way he played so toxic masculinity, it was so. The actor
I thought that
did
was
it pulled it off great.
hilarious. It was
But-
so awful. It was kind of awesome, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He pulled it off so well. Like talk about like that episode, like in the fact that they like did the like slow motion.
Like
Like,
the
if you
debate
do-
watch thing, like they go like run really slow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like just his introduction and Lex and like Adam's here, and you're like, oh yeah, we've talked about
But
it.
yeah,
Well, I like that he's so like completely clueless as to what a toxic masculinity example he was too, and then after a while he's kind of like, oh, like it like he wasn't quite so stupid that it didn't sink in when somebody explained what a jerk he was to him. That was kind of hilarious.
Well, yeah, especially when I love that when Lucifer meets him later and is like, after he's like kidnapped Linda, and he's like, so I've been talking to Linda and she's been telling me that I need to change. And then he's like, so you kidnapped a woman because you're toxic to prove that you're not like it's the greatest.
Yeah.
Like you're doing this wrong, kind of.
yeah.
But also talk about the fact that like in Maze loves Eve so much, but she's like torn away because of the whole family aspect of like I don't want my siblings, which are demons, and it's whole again family is such a big
Mm-hmm.
overarching theme, but the way they did it about she brings in Adam to like blow this up was like an interesting way too of like even though Adam dated her mother like that we tie it all into like the whole storyline, so
Yeah.
I thought that was great. But I also didn't realize until Joe said it on that other podcast I alluded to that this is the first time we see the entire cast in a scene together is the wedding.
Yeah, that makes sense because there's often somebody missing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
thought that was great that they did that, where like, everybody's, even Dan as Ghost Dan.
Yeah. And Tracy was there.
And Trixie, yes.
There's a subject we're gonna have to get to.
Yeah.
I just like wonder where has Trixie been all these like seasons, like all this time. Where is she? And they kept on messaging her. Oh, she's at camp, and I'm like, okay, show us where Trixie is. Where's this camp at?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, why bring Trixie back? Like, it's crazy. She's crazy.
Well, I didn't realize how busy Scarlett as an actress
Yeah.
is, though. That's why
She's
she
in a
was in,
lot
she
of
was just
things.
she's in like
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 different shows. Like
Yeah. Well, I would imagine as they've sat her from season to season, as they've had to sit and wait for like renewal notices and stuff. I bet she's taken on other commitments because she's a popular young actress, and I bet they've then had to go back and slot her into things afterwards once they found out they were continuing. And I'm sure that was probably a kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were trying to just make it work.
Mhm.
Scheduling conflicts are hard in this industry, I can imagine.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm not mad about her not being in the season that much, even though we love Trixie. Because knowing the inside baseball, she's an actress on a million different shows apparently. But at the same time, I also get the frustration that we talk about her a lot and she's not in the scene. So
Yeah.
So I get both sides. So
especially at all these really important moments. And I mean, it is what it is, but it just seemed like why wasn't Trixie there here and there? But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I will say, if the show does come back in some form in the future, maybe that will be a big plot twist about explaining more about Trixie and what she's done and who she's become. If that was to ever come to fruition. Anyway, what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say maybe when I was watching with my parents, my mom's like, "Where's Trixie? Where's Trixie? Where's well, how come she's not in it? Like she needs to be in it." I'm like, she's probably busy. like it's. My mom only likes one character, and it's Trixie. Not she doesn't like anything except Trixie. So I'm like, you're gonna be upsetting.
Yeah. Well, I also saw a lot of chatter about people not seeing Charlie lot, and I was just like, he's a toddler. I mean, they did put him in the season later, but I mean that there's only 10 episodes. They had to get to a lot, so
a lot of loose ends to tie up. So I mean, yeah, you can't do everything.
Yeah. But let's talk about the wedding and how beautifully shot and just. I think this is not the first time, but one of the most emotional things. Just because you're so happy that this is happening and nothing interrupts it. Everybody's happy. Like I said, everybody's in the scene together. Until later in this episode, which is a big reveal. But the wedding itself and how it's officiated by Linda and and Adam actually is like, I want to walk you down the aisle. It actually is a nice gesture, but Eve is like, I got to do this on my own, and it's very about empowerment and the parallels between her character always having people and May's needing people, which is why Linda walked her down the aisle. I thought was cool. I just thought it was such a beautifully done wedding. Like, if it would be a May's Eve wedding, that's what you would want. Like, there was nothing of details, like, even down to the reception of, like, how it's decorated. Like, they did the detail of the crew is so great about what the reception would be until we get to Ella drunkenly spilling her guts out. But who doesn't at a wedding?
There you go. It's par for the course, right?
Yeah. So what were your guys' thoughts on just how it was shot and using that location and how it brought everything together, specifically with all the characters?
Well, it was so tender, and I think it is just really nice. Like you said, that nothing really interrupts it, and it just gets to happen, and you get a feeling that there's some happiness coming for characters, and I think we needed that because it's not there. We've seen a lot of tragedy in the show, and it's just really nice to see something good happen, something genuinely good. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, I love the entire how they shot it. They first shot Maze and Linda walking down, and you hear them talking about how they're so closely needed. But yeah, it's such an amazing thing that they shot. I was actually crying during the episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful.
Actually
I really enjoy the costumes, everyone's dresses. It was so gorgeous. was
It was
just perfect.
pretty.
Yeah.
And everybody looked gorgeous. Yeah, definitely.
You're so gorgeous.
So, as I alluded to in this episode, I mean, we kind of saw it happen, but what are your guys' thoughts on how Ella figures out who everybody is? I thought that was a great way of, because we all wondered if Ella's ever going to find out. And then the way, of course, she's a scientist. She figures it out, but also has the faith to believe it too, because she's the one that character that's had faith and believes in God from basically since her introduction. I thought that was a really clever way of her, and then like in the wedding, just being like, "Come on," like we see her drinking more than normal, and we're like, "Uh oh, something's gonna happen" when she's on her like fifth champagne flute. Um, but what were your thoughts on how they introduced the fact that Ella's figured this all out? She's been investigating them the whole time.
I thought that it was. I thought it was really good how they like try to figure out like how she can get like know that she's like working with angels, the devil. I like doing the board, and I'm like, oh, she's definitely doing some detective work on these guys. Like they stuck the
Yeah.
the angel wings.
Yeah, and her board.
Yeah, her entire like board.
Yeah, it's covered in stuff.
And
Which
then when it
I
was
thought
all later, she was drunk. Like usually,
Yeah. Yeah. Amy Garcia played that scene so well. Not that she isn't a great actress, but I just thought, you know, where else would you not spill your guts than drunkenly at a wedding reception?
It's like real life.
Yeah.
Well, I think she did a really good job with that, like, sense of hurt and betrayal. Like, it came out and her just kind of, word vomiting up everything that she was feeling. And she did a really nice job and just looking really kind of crushed. Like, how could you not tell me this? Like, I thought we were closer. And I thought it was a sad scene, but sort of like a really neat scene, too. It needed to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I also think, too, it's funny that at the end of that, she also adds the caveat, so the world's ending. And the rest of everybody's like,
They say what?
yeah. She's like, you mean you don't know that the world's ending? That's not good.
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And I love that scene's so heavy right there. And then they bring in the comedic element of Carol coming back in and being like, so what did I miss? And you're just like, epic. Yeah.
Like the one guy who like goes to like the bathroom, and then you hear like everything that has like crap doing one area, and then you come back. It's like, okay, I'm done with the bathroom. What conversation is this?
Yeah.
TLDR.
So he's not gonna find her.
Yeah. I do want to mention. I just want to stop for a second and mention that thank you to everybody that's watching this live. I do see your comments coming in, and I didn't want to blaze over this watching online about Trixie mostly being ignored, but we kind of covered the fact that it came out that she was just on like a few Disney shows. There was just timing and scheduling for her as an actress. So I agree, the character was ignored, but I think it was something with both shooting during COVID and just everybody's schedules that's just kind of what happened.
Yeah.
But maybe
she's kind of a fan favorite, so I think we all sort of felt that loss a little bit because we missed her, and it was just such a bummer. But yeah, like I mean, they probably did what they could.
Yeah. All right, so wow, we're almost to the end. We have 3 more episodes to talk about. So the next one is Save the Devil, Save the World, which again is not a light episode by any means. But I just think it's funny how even through all of this, in this episode is like Lucifer's like, "Am I ready? I guess I'm ready to be God." But we all are like, "But are you?"
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too.
And the way, I will say, we haven't really specifically got into details, but I would have to say that we can't overlook every cast member and every guest star The acting in the show is just superb. I mean, and also the fact that like as the show has evolved and the characters have evolved, so has the acting in a sense, because these are really heavy like scenes, and I mean for all of us to be like a blubbering mess by now, when you're watching it the first time, I'm like, oh crap. But in this episode, I think this is another way of tying in more of the family aspect and Rory. But what is going to be your purpose? I think they foreshadow of like what is going to happen beyond the storyline. Like what would be a future Lucifer? What would be a future? What's Rory going to do? So let's talk about this episode as kind of a pivotal episode in the season to like, okay, stuff's really serious. Like, who's God? The world's ending. What's happening?
It's I was like I read a couple of articles about this episode, and it mostly like contained like from previous seasons, like they reflect on like their old selves, and then they like see like, oh, I have to be a better person than that. And then I also read that like this episode was like a mini like throwback to an Avatar season that they go to play and see themselves again. Like be the play from the show Avatar.
Right.
Most felt like it's a recap of the whole Lucifer saga because of Linda writing a book and going back to different scenes and different memories. And honestly, this was not my favorite episode. It seemed a bit slow and too detailed, but there was one of my favorite scenes was when Ella saw Amanadiel wings, because that was that her face is just so angelic, and it was a perfect moment.
I agree. But I also think it's another thing that we kind of all wanted to see is the fact that now she's like, yeah, I know you're all angels and demons and whatever.
Yeah.
I know it exists. I would be the one to believe it, that she finally gets to see it for herself of a Amenadiel flying with the wings. It's just a great way of showing like, yes, this is happening. But
I had happy tears.
yeah.
Well, it felt really earned. I think that particular moment was like so earned. It was time.
Yes.
And it was so like heartwarming.
Agreed. Yeah, and it's another thing also. Well, I agree. It was kind of a slower episode, but I think it was necessary in terms of like, okay, now Ella knows. Now the whole gang knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Now what are we gonna do about it? Because the world's ending. So yeah, I would say it was kind of a slower episode, but it needed. Now, there wasn't any more explanation other than, of course, we want other characters to know, like, or if Trixie knew. But the point is we also want to be happy for the fact that Maze and Eve are gonna go on their honeymoon, and like, so there's just like every character has something going on. But I think this episode was necessary in terms of like, okay, so the whole gang knows, and so it's not just about some people knowing some things, because that also alludes to like parallels in reality of life, of how sometimes you feel like you want everybody to know what's going on. Like in my family, sometimes it's like, does everybody know what's going on, or are we all on the same page? So I think this is the first like episode that needed to happen where everybody knows, so let's put a plan together, but also address the growth that everybody's been through. Because we always talk about Lucifer and the therapy and what his character in terms of redemption, but if you really think about it, every character has gone through some sort of growth. Specifically, I think that's a big reason why Dan's death in season 5 hit us all so hard, is because he's grown as a character of like we didn't. Not that he was a bad character, but we were all kind of were like, Dan hates Lucifer. What's the big deal? And like, there's been this like whole thing of like, is he always going to be angry at Lucifer? And then they're really bracelet bros for life, and basically so every character has had some sort of growth. It's not just Lucifer. So.
In an earlier season, I hashtagged for the longest time redemption for Dan.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like hoping that was going to happen, and in his own way, he got that.
Right.
It also addressed that how, because we're looking at the story from Linda's point of view and the way she wrote it, and her storytelling is completely different than how we knew it in the story.
Yeah.
So it addresses that when there's a story, there are different point of views, and it can create a completely different outcome, different storyline. So.
Well, sure, and especially her as a therapist.
Yeah.
She's going to see it in a certain lens that may not jive with everybody else's. And, she was also probably trying to, write for, literary license or poetic license too, to kind of spice things up. But it was just funny to see that perspective, how differently it was playing out in heads.
Yeah.
Well, and also it touched on the fact that we bring back Linda and like, she has a lot of stuff on Lucifer and everybody. She's been everybody's therapist, which really that's the one.
She knows where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's inaccurate though, is that she wouldn't be everybody's therapist. She would start out as Lucifer, because that's the one thing that's been inaccurate. But it's also great that every character has gone to Linda for help in some aspect. So I think I can let it slide that in reality that wouldn't happen, but it's great that the fact that the manuscript's like so long and it's like, oh no, that's just the first chapter, and it's like,
well, I think I feel like we're starting to get such a sense of like Lucifer's level of respect for Linda as a character, which obviously the very end tells us that, but like, just he has so much respect. Even though he doesn't say it enough, he's learned so much from her, not just about himself, but about life in general. And seeing her take on some of the same things, I find just so interesting. Like there's a respect right back.
Right.
I just like how like their bond between like a therapist and like a friend is really amazing, and like she see him grow from like stubborn like person to like not like a stubborn person, but like an immature, like not ready to be God or not ready to be, the devil, to like a fully grown, like mentally stable person.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it was a really, like you said, I think it's a necessary episode, because I think it gives some clarity to some things, just because we get to see other perspectives and kind of fill in some gaps. So yeah, it was slower, but I didn't dislike it at all. I thought it was an interesting episode.
Yeah, I mean, because again, it ties in maybe some questions that we've had in the past, like now that Ella knows, now that there's, people. She also knows about Dan being a ghost, basically, not a frog. So, which again, when that happened, when she's leaving the date with Carol, and then the frog happened, I was like, that was great, because they mentioned frogs are not falling out of the sky. Like, literally, they always said that, and then literally it happens. So I like Mira alluded to, all the details of the show is a big reason why it's so intriguing, especially when you rewatch it, because you're like, oh yeah. So the next episode, it's heavy, very heavy. Next 2 episodes. So Goodbye Lucifer is epic. I would say the most beautiful musical, other than when Lucifer sings with Rory, which is a great, episode. But the scene in this episode, towards the end, in the panic room, I lost it because that song too. They got me with that song.
Yeah, that the song is
in
like
a movie always makes you cry. Uh, um, but before we get to that part of the episode, just the idea that I like the idea that even after all of the detective work that they both have done as Lucifer and Chloe, they still are very unsure of what's going on. Of like, how does Lucifer die, and how do we prevent this from happening? So let's talk about how epic this. Before we get to the final episode, but how epic episode 9 is in terms of just everything going on and the emotions really hitting home for every character.
Well, it seems it's so serious. Like, everything's finally coming to a head a little bit. And I think there's also some anticipation and some fear from the fandom while we're watching it too, because they know it's the end, we know it's the end, and everything just hurts a little bit more because of that. So those moments are even more poignant. Sorry, Trixie says hi. So those moments are just a little more poignant because we know what's coming, and so do they, and
Right.
we're all dreading.
I just feel like this episode, like each character that Lucifer goes to has their special moment, and he's saying goodbye to them and trying to say, "I won't." It's not goodbye. It's just the beginning of what I have to do in order to be better.
I mean, it hits home more now knowing that that episode was basically the last time that Tom and the cast was seeing each other, basically, except for the final episode, because you could see it, like the emotion of this is my final scene with you, and also the final of our characters. It played, yeah, it was heavy. Specifically, I think the one I think you guys would agree, but the one that was the most heartbreaking was Maze.
Yeah.
Because she knows something's up, but she didn't know how to ask, okay, why are you leaving? Why are you saying goodbye to me? Why are you what is happening? And I'm going on my honeymoon. What is Maze knows something was up, but also at the same time is things have changed. I moved, I'm going on my honeymoon. I'm spending time with you. So I think that one hit harder, almost harder than when he set up a foundation for Ella, because that's very important about STEM. But what are your thoughts about which goodbye hurt you the most, basically? Because that one's just so heavy.
I would have to say Ella too.
Yeah.
Ella just hit home for me because even though she just figured out now that she's working with angels, and Lucifer's saying goodbye to her, I just feel like she needs him more than ever. But basically, she has Carol to do that for her.
Right.
I would say Linda, but she's kind of my favorite. So I just feel like she's the first person who got him. And they had just such a unique relationship, friendship. It was a different level because it took a while for everybody else to sort of come around. And she was, in on the secret quick, and she accepted him quickly. And I don't know. That one hurt to me the most. Because I felt like the one with Ella, what to me wasn't sad. It was hopeful. So I didn't feel like that one was sad. But for Linda, it was goodbye. And, her son, her child is, his nephew, and wasn't going to be seeing him again. And that was a lot.
And also the big revelation of Amenadiel being I'm going to become God. This is finally when we're finally.
Yeah.
But also,
Should have been that from the beginning.
yeah, but also the brotherhood of them being like,
Mhm.
and that goodbye. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're my favorite brother. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
after
it took
all,
them.
yeah,
It took them so long to get to that point, and they were finally settled into that relationship, and it was going to have to change again.
yeah. But still, it was great because in Amenadiel becoming a cop and wanting to make the world a better place, it just made sense. But we
Mhm.
all said that in the beginning. But I think it's great that they like made it happen. Of like,
Mhm.
Amenadiel should have been God all along.
Right.
But again, that goes with the growth element of like every character finding
Oh yeah.
their purpose.
Well, and just like life as a therapy itself, sometimes it takes a while before you figure out, like in Lucifer's case, as we know now, like figure out who you are and what you want to do, and you don't always come to it easily. Sometimes you got to go through some painful stuff to get to that point and change your mind a lot,
Right.
and then you finally, hopefully, find yourself. And he got there, and they both did eventually.
And also seeing Rory, how she started to make peace with Lucifer, like
Mhm.
not being so angry, and them having an outing together as a family,
Mhm.
that was just so beautifully done. That was one of my favorites in it.
Yeah,
They're
that was
like
really a point that was
on the
poignant.
beach.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that scene. That scene of like basically when he's just like, take care of her, and like, you know, if I had my choice, I would not abandon you because I was abandoned by my father. And that
Mhm.
whole circle moment of basically that we, Lucifer being able to yeah, I went through this trauma. I if it, I would not do this to you if it was my choice, kind of
Mhm.
situation. Was It was just heartwarming, but also very sad because it's like, they're a family now. Like,
Yeah.
you want them to be a
A
big happy
family.
family. Yeah.
But sometimes when you're a parent, you have to make hard choices because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's kind of the overarching idea is that you don't always get what you want. You have to do what's right and what's best, even if it hurts. And I think that's what ultimately ended up happening. Even though it worked itself out, obviously, but parenting is hard and you have to
Yeah.
do things you don't always want to do sometimes. And
Sacrifice to be
I've got a
made.
grown-up one, so I mean, it's raising kids is hard, and you have to make choices.
Right.
And also when Dan got to finally talk to Trixie and say his goodbye in the body of
Lamech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lamech, who Rob Benedict was God actually in Supernatural.
Yeah.
So glad to see.
he was
I
a
mean,
jerk there too.
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, big time. But
Yeah.
he played so well, and I loved his French accent and all that. Like, I love that guy. But that
I think
moment
that
with
was cool.
Trixie was so heart wrenching and heartwarming at the same time.
Yeah, I think that was great that that too, because we're still like, you're still wanting Dan to get some sort of redemption and get to heaven. We all wanted him to get to heaven. So the way that they did this of like somehow wills his way to get into Lamech's body, which is hilarious because that's the man that killed him. And then the scene with Trixie. Now that's when we see her at space camp, and he finally gets to have that scene where he then goes to heaven because that was what he wanted. He wanted to have closure with Trixie and be like, "Are you proud of me? Was I a good dad?" That of course hits you in the field before, but I did like the beginning, how they did again all the little comedic moments because everything was so heavy. But I love in this scene as Lamech when she says it, she's like stranger danger and like yeah, and it's like and it's great because it's like, oh yeah, Maze taught her how to like fight. We haven't talked about
And that's
that.
such a Trixie thing to do, just as far as the character.
Yeah.
And like Dan's like recognizing like, oh, I'm not in my body. I'm in Lamech's body.
Yeah.
I
But
think that was a cathartic scene. Like,
yeah.
even though she didn't know exactly what was happening, it needed to happen, and I think I felt like it was a good moment for the whole, like, all the fans to kind of go, finally, like, you just needed that to come out and
Yeah.
be done, and felt like we had gotten robbed of that when he died. So I felt like it was just a really good moment, and it was so sweet, but it was funny too, so I mean,
Yeah.
they worked out really well.
Especially since she's like, prove it. And she starts quizzing them. And you're like, what's my favorite food? What's my chocolate cake? Like, it was just really funny.
I think that's like a callback to season 4 where Trixie starts like interrogating Eve, like,
Yeah.
who are you? Like, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
It's so great.
just like her mom.
Yeah. So, let's go to the scene at the end where, so Lucifer builds the panic room so he doesn't go to 10th Street Swanson. Which, now I need to go back to LA and find 10th and Swanson for some reason. Because I think I did see it when I lived there. But anyway, point is,
Google Maps.
yeah. It's one of those things where, panic room. And then I love how it's like, you had a day to do it and you walk in and it's like glorious. It's like the best panic room. You want to like live in the panic room. And
Infinitely rich.
yeah, but that scene with the music and the dancing and the emotion of and the gravity of it, and also just how they brought in the score too to add to the drama of like, oh, it's now midnight. What is happening? So let's kind of go over that scene and how poignant that scene is, and also because it's Kevin Alejandro directed this episode, so apparently he just talks to Tom and Lauren and is like, here's some notes, and then they just, according to what was on Twitter by Chris Rafferty, I think he tweeted this, was like, it was just basically Tom and Lauren improvising, kind of. I mean, they had a couple of notes from Kevin, but we just followed them with cameras, and this is what happened naturally, and it's like so beautiful. Like, I don't know, that scene got me really hard. So, I mean, because it's Decker Store at its finest, so it's like, how do you not with that scene? But like, what was your thoughts of bookending the episode? Because we think, oh, finally, no, he's not going to go to 10th and Swanson. What is happening? So, what are your thoughts on that scene? Because it got me hard.
Tears.
Yeah.
I was crying. When they played this song and I was like looking at the dance and I was crying my heart out. And all I can think is like, this is like the last dance or like the last like moment together before like they disappear forever.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments that you didn't want to end because then you were afraid what's coming next. You knew it's not good or happy, and you just wanted to hold it.
Yeah.
Wanted Bert to stand still forever.
Right. It's just, but it was so beautiful though. Like,
it was gorgeous.
Yeah, the way the camera, I don't know. I get a little, because I took film in college, I get very like specific about the camera angles and the way they shoot it. So I'm kind of like, it was so beautifully done, and
I taught that class, so I do the same thing. Spent 15 years doing that. Yeah, I agree with you though, and I think they did such a good job at like drawing it out and making it feel like it lasted so long. And I felt like that was a really good payoff to me. Like, we've waited for these moments, and like the fandom loves them so much, and we got this really poignant, slow, long, heartfelt moment, and it was earned. I felt like it was earned, and we got it.
We definitely earned that.
Yeah.
Well, specifically because in the wedding scene, Chloe goes over and like, time to dance, and then it gets interrupted by Ella. So this is great that they had their little like slow dance moment that kind of harkened back to the prom episode.
Which we all loved that part.
Yeah. So I just thought that, again, the details.
Yeah. Well,
the
that's
cast.
it. Like you said earlier, everything is looped. Like they looped so
Yeah.
much stuff for this whole season. Every episode called back to something else in some way, and it was just so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're to the final episode, and
Oh man.
it's the thing is about this is like we get to the end of the last episode where they're like, "Oh yay, we're out of the panic room. Nothing happened," and then the phone call happens,
Mm-hmm.
And it's
and of course,
Rory crying.
yeah. Well, no, but yeah, it's like Lamech took her, and it's like, of course, because Dan was in his body, and details were shared, and you're like, oh no, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
So this episode of just okay, now we're going to 10th and Swanson after talking about it a million times, and to save Rory, but also Chloe's pregnant with Rory from the timeline in the past, so like they still didn't gloss over the fact that Lucifer wants to be cautious of her fighting when she's pregnant with Rory. But it's also I love how they brought in the tie of like fate versus free will. Of that debate and how what happens with our choices, like you mentioned, and that again the details of it's not just there's more themes, but it's also parallels to reality and what we deal with as humans as we go through life. So I thought that was great, but also again it's the final episode, but it's so epically shot. So talk about like when they go to 10th and Swanson and the fight. I just love that they used the song they used.
Mm-hmm.
And just how didn't Sherwin he did a lot. He directed this, right? The one that he also directed the musical episode,
I
right?
think so.
But I think that's what Joe and Ildy said on that other podcast that I listened to. But talk about that scene of them fighting in the warehouse and going after Rory and just the united front of Chloe and Lucifer, especially after how the last episode ended.
It was really fast paced.
Yeah.
That episode flew by versus the one before it was slower paced. And this one, it was just like you blinked.
Slow down one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way they panned, again, sorry about the technical camera angles, but the way they panned that shot of them fighting all of the people and using that and as a team, and just that song was so brilliantly placed because I haven't heard that song since like I listened to that album because that was like on a B-side. But like just the slow-mo of it worked, because sometimes when slow-mo is overused in a fight scene it gets a little cheesy in my opinion, but the way they did it, it was beautiful.
It's such a trope. It's a trope, yeah.
Yeah.
It's used way too much sometimes, but I think it drew out those moments of us not knowing exactly what was going to happen, and the stakes were so high, and we all knew this is the end, so what is going to happen? I think it worked really well for that.
Yeah.
The way I watched it, I binged the first 9 episodes, and then I needed a break, and I went to sleep, and I watched the final episode by itself, and I'm glad I did it because it was so cinematic, so beautifully done, and with the music, everything was so spot on that I was super happy with it. It was just a feast for my eyes. I don't know how anybody else.
Yeah. Well, I remember we were all binge watching it, and I think we put it in Facebook or Twitter or something. I think that the one group that we're all in, but you mentioned how brilliant that episode was. So after I binge watched it and I was like in shock, I went back and just watched that episode before I rewatched the season again, and I was like, yeah, to end the show on how great this was put together and just shot. It was a masterpiece, and like
it was like the final fight scene for Lucifer.
Yeah. Went out with a bang.
Right, and I just you couldn't end it, despite the controversy of the whole plot line of the season. I think you couldn't end it any other way, in my opinion, because we kept hearing, like the cast and crew being like, it's going to end bittersweet. I think everybody's going to love this. And I was like, okay, I hope, don't get my hopes up, but also like, how are they going to do it? And it was beautiful the way they ended it. I mean, it's funny is that these episodes were long. I mean, very long episodes, but it's also because it's Netflix and they had to fit a lot into 10 episodes. But even so, even the ones that we've talked about that were kind of slower, get to the point kind of situations, this one, yeah, like I said, it felt like 2 minutes. There was so much going on, but yet it was a long episode. So I think it was great how well they shot it so that you don't even realize that it's like over an hour long. There's so much going on, and it's the final one. Because specifically when they get to the point where, in this episode, where Chloe's older, like the whole montage of Rory being born, of Charlie getting his wings, of
It's so cute.
yeah, that reaction by Linda, fantastic. But
I
the whole
think
montage,
I thought Charlie was not like half human.
yeah. Well, that's what we all
I thought Charlie
today.
was not going.
Yeah. But we alluded to the fact because Rory's half angel, that, she has wings. So they also kind of bring back the like self-actualization of angels and all of that. But I think they did it beautifully done with the montage to like tie up everybody else, as well as I think the controversy comes in this episode from everybody of like, okay, so why did Rory leave in the timeline of time travel? I think because time travel has been talked about in so many pop culture shows that the idea, I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around the timeline of it. Like, why did this still need to happen even after everything that's gone on? Of like Rory coming around and them being a family and Lucifer being like, yeah, I'm going to help lost souls in hell. But the timeline still needed to happen. And then you see Chloe older in life and die and the whole thing. I think that, do you think that it was, I see both sides of the story, but I thought it was beautifully done and how the storyline was wrapped up. But I could also see how some people would think that, well, after the scenes of them being together, why would they rip the family apart? So what are your thoughts on how they tied that up and how we get to where we do?
Well,
Go ahead.
I had hoped for that part to be a bit different, but that's, like I said earlier, it wasn't my story to tell. I had a different parts of the ending I envisioned differently. So it didn't quite go exactly where I thought it was going to go. But I'm not the one making the story, so I didn't love parts of that, but I've learned to respect them, I think is the easiest way to put it. Because I don't know, I guess I was hoping for something else, but I made peace with it, so I'm okay. It didn't go where I thought it was going to go, but I'm all right with it.
At first when I watched it, I didn't understand why she had to go back. But now, like, since I watched it like 2 million times, or like, I know the reason why is because she had to go back in order to make the timeline happen. Like, she had to do this in order to like be with her family, and understand why her dad left her to save many other people instead of her.
Well, I do like that they tied that up where she's not angry anymore. She understands why he left, and that's not a mystery anymore. But I think I do understand the kind of disappointment of like that, the way that's the reason why. I don't know. Also because there's also a lot of questions, because I did see this when people tuned into the other podcast with the showrunners, a lot of questions about, well, why can't Lucifer just pop up and down? And why, the whole commuting thing we've talked about a million times of like, and the Minadel being God from Earth. Like, why can't that happen with their timeline and their story? So I do understand the kind of like, but wait. But I also think, again, yeah, I mean, they wrote it, they made it, it is what it is. So I see both, like, again, I'm very devil's advocate with it, not pun intended, but it's interesting how they, with everything going on, how emotional it was, though. I mean, I think the fact that we have that scene between older Chloe on her deathbed and Rory needed to happen. But I do wonder the deleted scenes, because there was a couple deleted scenes from this final episode that I think they should have kept. Because I know they were doing it for time, probably.
Yeah.
But I think if they would have kept, from what I understand, there was a longer episode when Chloe, as the older Chloe on her deathbed, there's more characters in that because Trixie's there.
Yeah, Trixie's there.
And so that ties in. So I hope they release these like deleted scenes, because I think that would also help everybody kind of with, okay, this is why.
They kept it.
But I don't know, maybe that would open up a new can of worms. I don't know.
We're still looking for like the soundtrack to season 6.
Yeah. True. But I also think that has to do with what's going on with the music industry, and I'm not going to get into that right now. But like, with music rights and publishing, it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
eventually they want to release it, but it takes a while. But I think that's a big. So I get it all, but I also I understand the disappointment and how that kind of timeline happened. But it's also because there's been so many references to like time travel in history that I think everybody has their own idea of what time travel is. So I think that's why it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around it as well.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I've just learned to make some peace with it, because like it's I don't want to overthink something that's fictional. Like, I just think that's crazy. But like, you know, I don't feel like I don't want to let my having a different expectation of what I had hoped to see in the end kind of cloud how I view the series as a whole and how much I love it. And so that's why I've found a way to make my peace with it. It didn't go the way I would have thought, but I didn't dislike it. So,
right.
And again, I'm staying diplomatic for a reason, but it's TV and it makes me happy, and I don't want to let the end of it not being exactly what I personally wanted change the epicness of the show. I mean, it changed a lot of lives for a lot of us. I think I've made peace because I want to walk away with a really good, strong feeling of it. So that's just the way that's just me. But, that's just my diplomatic take on it, I guess.
Me personally, I did not imagine any ending, so I just left it up in the air. Whatever happens, happens. And I think people are more used to the traditional happy endings in shows.
Yeah.
And this was a little bit twisted in a way that it's not your traditional ending for a happy ending. It's kind of a happy ending, though, because they end up together. Regardless.
They just have to wait for it.
I liked it, yeah.
I liked it. Yeah, go ahead.
I understand how other people don't like it, but it boils down to humanity as we are.
Sure. Perspective. We all have different perspectives, so we want different things and we see different things, and we have different feelings about the things that we've seen. So sure, there are some people who are really disappointed and some people who really loved it. And I respect all of that.
All different versions of Linda Martin.
There you go.
I had what I thought of, what I imagined was they're gonna either hell or heaven together, working on a case or working on a therapy session, and just being together. But when I see it, it's like my dreams came true, but like I want more than that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
want more.
I mean, to me, I thought it was a brilliant way to end it because, again, like you said, I don't need the bubblegum ending. I like that they had to work for it, and but they still end up together. I mean, it's not like that mystery never was solved. I mean, we finally got to Decker Star Endgame. I mean, why not? But I did, it's been a month or so since the show's been out, and I can't ignore us as a fandom and the how it's interesting how the people are on the fence about it. But I thought it was a great ending, and overall, I mean, we wouldn't be here talking about how intricate the show is, and met because of conventions, and there's going to be more conventions even after the show's ended that'll bring us all together. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it's great overall that this show happened, and a lot of stuff that we talked about is part of the show, like therapy and specific, hard themes. But wow, that was an epic season recap. But before we wrap up, I want to final thoughts on kind of this show as a whole, and how, because this show is just unlike any other show. I mean, being canceled twice basically and revived twice, it's never happened in history, for a show, and how popular it's gotten, and because of streaming taking over the world. Kind of your all's final thoughts on how, because they've been able to actually end it like they wanted to end it, what that means to a fan group as a whole.
I have a lot to say on that subject, so maybe you want me to go last?
Okay. It's up to you.
Go ahead.
Being the head of the biggest fan Twitter account ever.
It's weird.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Gail. I mean, elaborate
sure?
on yeah.
Well, I think because that's a lot to talk about, but like just to kind of make it quick, like when this show started out, and I've said this before on Twitter, and I think I've said it on Facebook a few times, but like the show has spent its entire existence fighting to exist. Like even from season 1, I mean, it's never not had to fight. Because it was a big hit in season 1, and then Fox kind of stopped paying a lot of attention to it, to put it nicely, and it just had to keep fighting and fighting. And I think for whatever random reason, we as a fandom seized on that. I don't know if it's a personal thing, like we can understand what it's like to have to fight for survival, and it just drew everybody together so tightly. I mean, I guess constantly having to fight for the right to exist as a TV show is something that really can knit people together pretty tightly. And then it moves eventually onto a streaming platform, and then it becomes like this huge, massive hit, like the hit we always knew that it should have been and could have been, and it becomes this thing. And now it being done is just sort of hard. Like, now what?
Yeah.
But I feel like we were so lucky to, in some cases, sort of be in the right place at the right time. And it's not even just us as a fandom, but like the showrunners, the cast, the crew, everybody believed in it enough to keep fighting. And I think there's a reliance of us on them and them on us in feeling like we're all in this together to a point that just did something so unique that I don't know if that's something that's going to happen again. It's like lightning has to strike at just the right time. I feel like I never expected, like, at least for me personally, I never expected all of this to happen. You know, Jane and I started our Twitter and our Facebook just like, we should all get everybody together and we should try to trend because people are using all these different hashtags and there's no concerted effort. And we did that thing, and for whatever reason, the fandom just got bigger and bigger, and that's not us, that's you guys. You know, we're just one little cog in a great big machine. but like we did this thing, and for whatever reason, we all, I don't know, we became like this big family. I don't know, fighting for things, I guess, just makes you a big team. And it's changed a lot of things in like my life. And, you know, Jane's passed away now. And so, like, I just feel like, I don't know, I think it did something I didn't expect. This, as like Joe and Ildi always say, you know, this little show about the devil, like, did something I could have never in a million years guessed. And I feel like so privileged to have just been along for the ride. I mean, I'm just one little person out of a whole lot, and there's so many amazing people out there. Like you guys did this. It wasn't me. It was you guys. It's us as a collective. You guys are amazing, and the show is amazing, and there are so many people who have found this comfortable, happy home there. And the show gave you the freedom to do that and to be that and to feel comfortable in your own skin and to express yourself and to create and to say things you need to say and to stand up for things that are important to you. And that comes down directly from the show, from the writers, from the cast, from the crew, because that's who they are. And that's, you know, we've felt like we can identify with them, and it's a life changing thing. And I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing that's ever going to like, does lightning strike twice? Is it ever going to happen again? And I think we're all so incredibly lucky to have been part of this thing that's so much bigger than us. So there's my essay on it, I guess.
Well said.
My journey with like the show is like, it started on my birthday, so I had like my sister texted me saying there's a new show coming to Fox, like you should watch it. It's really, really good. The show is amazing, and like talking about. So I basically watched it on my birthday, and I was like, this is a really good show, and it's really amazing that I get to share like a birthday with like an amazing show. And throughout the like 6 seasons, I fell in love with it. I got my friends to watch it. Even got my best friend to even say that it's one of the best shows ever. It should run for like 11 seasons. And I made I made so many friends. Like I started my Instagram. I made a lot of friends on there. Like they helped me through it. Even through bad times, I like turned to them, and like they became family to me.
Right. What's funny about this show for me personally is I'm one of these people that cut cable cord a long time ago. So I've been streaming for years. I've been giving Netflix my money for too long, but I didn't find it until it was on Netflix. But I do remember seeing the hashtag the year before to save Lucifer, and I didn't know what that meant. I saw it trending because I've been on social media since social media started, but I didn't know what that meant because I didn't have Fox. I didn't know what was. As much as I'm a pop culture junkie, I was switching to the whole streaming thing that we're on now, kind of early in the game. So I didn't know. I remember seeing that trending, but I had no idea what that meant. And then when it came to Netflix, I found it. It was suggested in my queue, and I was like, all right. And I was hooked from basically the first 2 seconds of the show.
The music.
Yeah, the music. The minute the music starts, I was like, uh-oh. And then I think what really got me in the first episode was when he walks into Lux for the first time, and they play Fame by David Bowie.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite David Bowie track. I was like, all right, it's on. This show is the best. Because they know their music. But anyway, yeah, so for me, I came late. But it was also, as you mentioned, and everybody's kind of mentioned it, how it brought people into their life that they didn't think would happen, and there's this connection. This was also, I'm wearing the shirt, but I went to my first like convention because of it. LucyCon in 2019. Wow, that seems like forever ago now.
I know, isn't that crazy?
And I met you, Mara, and I met you, Gail, and Diana, and a few of the other ladies that weren't able to make it today. And now we're gonna all do it again next year in New Jersey because it's just this special show, but it's also more than that, but we not. It's like it's hard to explain, but it's great that like there's other people that see kind of what the show's done and kind of just the epic, like you mentioned, fight that it's gone through of being canceled basically twice and coming back, and it's
But it created a safe space for people.
yeah.
It really did.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of us identify so strongly with it in various ways. It's just it made it's okay for you to be you, whoever you are. That's really important. A lot of people need that.
Yeah, the representation on the show with the characters, I think, with Maze and Lucifer itself and himself and like the diversity of the cast, I think that was a big draw as well. It's like, yeah, we're starting to see more representation in Hollywood together as it's been happening. But I think it was great that this show was a big proponent of that. Of we need to represent as many groups and show people as much as possible. The famous dog.
Here's your double dog, y'all.
So before we wrap up, I did want to shout out that. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I was gonna
ask. I was just collecting my thoughts, and my story is very similar to yours, Brooke. As I didn't have cable, I didn't know about the show until Netflix, and then I binged it, and then I heard about the Lucicon in LA, and then booked my ticket right away, and went there all by myself without knowing anybody, and then made tons of friends. And since I create things based on what inspires me, pretty much, I don't really follow trends or anything. And this show just sparked something in my brain, and maybe other people not gonna like what I create, but this is coming from me, from inside. That this show got in here, and then it came out, and it's a piece of me. And feel free to visit my website and see. I have a whole collection full of Lucifer stuff, and it's called Morningstars.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
And I try to create new ones, and I have other fandom created and other non-fandom related items as well. But this show was so inspiring, and all the little word plays and the fun that they put in there, it just cracks me up, even if I rewatch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a never-ending loop to rewatch this show, pretty much. So they accomplished what they intended, I believe, with closing, like going back to season 1, episode 1. And I am a musical oriented person as well. I used to be a professional dancer in theaters, so the music is important. And like from the first song, I was hooked because I love Cage the Elephant.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember Tom talking about that they tried to get the Rolling Stone song, Sympathy of the Devil.
Yeah.
Sympathy for the Devil.
That's just way overused. And that song connects me to Interview with a Vampire, because that was the ending of that movie. So I was happy inside that they had to choose that other song, which is No Rest for the Wicked.
Well, and it's such a good song because it's such a strong sound. Like there's an attitude to it. I feel like it just set the whole stage. Totally agree with you.
And throughout the whole series, the music was always spot on.
Yes.
So
shout
out to Justin.
Yeah, for those that I just did a Throwback Thursday episode. Justin was on this podcast. So if you want to check out that episode, we talk about
he's awesome.
Music supervision. And he's such a nice guy. Reach out to him on Twitter. And
he answers questions all the time on Twitter. He happily do.
Yeah, and for those that also don't know, I created a playlist of the music from the show or inspired by the show. There's links. If you go or you can go to tunefind.com and look up Lucifer.
Yep.
It's curated of what songs were used in the show. So if you want the names of them or to find them on any streaming platform, that's where I kind of also did my research for the playlist I created on Spotify. So definitely shout out to Justin and the production team and everybody for the music. A lot of people should know this, but music is like my life. So the fact that they integrated music so much, and that was a big part of Lucifer's character and the in Lux and everything. I think that was a big draw for me as well. Yeah, so everybody check out cherrybedesigns.com. I personally have some items. I have them. I don't know why I don't have them out right now. I have my podcast mug, but I don't have my Lucifer mug out. Shame on me. But as she has them in display, so definitely everybody. There's great stuff. The shirts, the bag. I have my bag she gave to me. I use as my purse basically. Like last night, I was actually fun story. I was out last night with some friends, and I had my Lucifer bag on me, and we're like, "Oh wow!" And I was like, "Yeah, there's quotes from the show. Check it out." So definitely check out our designs and our website. They're awesome. And we've gone 2 hours. My lord! Thank you everybody that tuned in for this episode, and thank you everybody. Thank you Gail. Thank you Carrie. Thank you Mary for being my guests on this episode and chatting about the show. And I know Gail, you're going to LucyCon. Are you going, Mary?
I'm not going to. I'm going to Lux.
Oh, you're going to Lux. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going. I had tickets to Chicago and they canceled it.
Okay. Well, I was gonna go to Lux, but I couldn't make that happen. So then I decided I'll go to the one in New Jersey because I had to cancel Lux. But conventions, everybody, definitely check out. I know they're like sold out ish. But there's one. I know there's one in France.
Yeah, I tried.
Yep.
And then there's one in Italy. Well, one that Tom goes to with like a lot of other supernatural cast members. And
Yeah, JibCon.
Yeah, and then there's, like I said, the new LucyCon is in New Jersey in the spring, and I know it's still. I think there's still tickets available, still passes. So if you're on the fence and you listen to this episode and you want to join us, come on down. It'll be fun. But thank you everybody to tuning in on this Saturday, and this video replay will be up immediately, and if you just want the audio only, it'll come up later this weekend. But thank you everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye. See you guys.